There we go.
I can
Hello,
indeed.
everyone. Thanks for awesome. Thanks for attending today's session. As you just heard, we have Andy with us. We love his sessions. And today we're going to be covering using the MIDI editor and the score editor in Pro Tools. So let's quickly get through the housekeeping so we can get it over to Andy. As you know, the sessions will be recorded and these will be posted back to avid.com. If you're joining us on Zoom, your session is muted, but you can always enter questions in the questions field. I will be trying to monitor the social feeds as well for questions, so go ahead and enter those in there as well, and we'll try to get these questions for Andy. So go ahead, chime in. Let us know where you're watching us from. Looks like we have people from the UK, Brazil, Colombia. Welcome, everyone, for joining the session today. As you know, Andy Hagerman is one of our Avid master instructors, and he writes a lot of our curriculum, and he's just overall amazing. So, Andy, I'm going to go ahead and hand the session over to you because I know you have so much to cover today.
And the check is in the mail for those nice words. So there we go. So Dawn, you're seeing Pro Tools now, right? Just to make sure we're doing it right.
Yep, I'm seeing it.
Perfect. So hello, everyone. Andy Hagerman here. And what we're going to talk about today is a little bit of an overview on the MIDI editors and the score editors. And if you're into MIDI, one of the best things about Pro Tools is that you can do your MIDI production inside of the same DAW that you do your audio stuff in. And the tools here are actually really, really good, but not always the best known. So let's take a look over here. So this is actually the music you were listening to on the in the introduction. And what we have are, just to give you a sense, I've got a whole bunch of different folder tracks. And these are routing folder tracks with my keyboards, classical, this is orchestra stuff, bass and drums, and so on and so forth. And I've opened up the first key folder track, and you can see I've got a number of different, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, it looks like 7 tracks here. And I've got a number of different MIDI clips on those tracks. Now, could I edit this MIDI inside the MIDI clip? Sure, I could. I could go into Notes View and I could drag them around. But there are some limitations I'm going to find. And first, I can take a look at notes, but only in kind of a piano roll view. And if I wanted to see notation, I'm kind of out of luck if I'm going to use the edit window. The other thing is that sometimes I want to see multiple parts together, and it's not as easy to do here. So while I find that working with clips and dragging and arranging is very nicely done in the edit window, sometimes getting into the tweaky bits of MIDI production, the edit window is not always the place that I want to be. Here's a couple of options that we have available to us. Now, one thing I'm going to call, just to kind of keep in the back of your head, is notice that on this delay piano, which is going to be the one that we're going to focus on today, notice that I have a blue clip at the beginning and another clip over here that I've specifically colored red, and that's significant. So just kind of stick a pin in that for now. Now, the first place we can go to take a look at MIDI data is a place called the Docked MIDI editor. And there's a number of different places you can go to show the MIDI editor. You can go to the View menu, and you can go to Other Displays, and you're going to see MIDI editor right down here. And that's the place you can go. It's not the most convenient place, so let's go to some other places. If you go to here, you can see in the pop-up menu in the upper right-hand corner, then down here I've got MIDI editor here, and I can click this. So I could do that, and that's pretty easy. The other way to do it, and this is probably the way I do most frequently, is if you take a look down at the bottom of the window, down at the bottom of the edit window, and you're going to see right at the bottom, close to the master fader, an upward pointing arrow. And the upward pointing arrow is going to reveal the Docked MIDI editor. Now, the cool thing about the Docked MIDI editor is that it's part of the edit window. So if you move the edit window or resize it, this thing travels with it. The other nice thing about it is that the same kinds of tools that you're going to use when you're editing clips, you're going to see exactly those tools down here in the Docked MIDI editor. So you've got your different edit modes: shuffle, spot, slip, and grid. You've got the zoom tool, you've got the trim, you've got the smart tool. All the stuff that you kind of are already really comfortable with, it's right down there. Now, the other thing that you have is over here in the tracks list is you can show, hide, or select tracks in the Docked MIDI editor separately from how you have the tracks shown and hidden in the tracks list up in the main body of the edit window. But the method is the same. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to take a look, and I'm going to show delay piano. It's already being shown. If I want to show another track as well, I can keep on adding MIDI data, and you can see some other data is creeping in there. If I unclick these and hide that, it's hiding that MIDI data. Now, notice, and this is something to keep in mind, because this is one place where people can, I think, sometimes get confused, is that notice that here, half of my notes are blue and the other half of the notes are red. That is because whenever you're looking in any of the MIDI editors, when you're looking at MIDI data in piano roll view, the notes will follow the color of the clip, not the color of the track, not the color of markers, nothing else. Whatever the color of your clips are, that's going to be the color of your notes by default. Okay, and there's a couple different ways you can work with it, but it's important to understand that that's the fundamental behavior. So you're going to see over here that I'll start playback over here. So I'll go back to the beginning, and I start playback, and you're going to see here that it's playing these notes over here. And you can hear the piano part, and you can see as it's moving over here at the top through this blue clip and then moves into the red clip, you're going to see it's showing the notes for that one shown track in the docked MIDI editor. Now, it gets better, because if I want to, working with piano roll is all well and good, but you're seeing here I need up and down to see all my notes. And I'm a trained literate musician. I like to be able to see notation. And so all you have to do is click this little note icon over here. There's a record button, there's a solo button, a mute button, and right next to it is a little notation button. And you click that and give it a second to do its thing. And now what you're seeing is exactly the same MIDI data, but as traditional notation. So now if I play it again, and here's the chords that are part of that MIDI track. Now, this becomes a nice little workflow tool, not only because I can have my MIDI data right alongside my audio data, but notice that I've got solo, mute, and record controls here in the dock MIDI editor. So if I'm working in the dock MIDI editor, and for whatever reason I want to just hear this part real quickly, well, I don't have to leave where I am. I can just click the solo button here. So let me give you an example of how this is going to work. So I'm going to go ahead and play back. And you can hear all the other different parts that are going on in the arrangement. But if I hit solo, now it solos in place. It's regular solo, but it solos that track or tracks. Any tracks that are selected will be soloed in here, so I can listen to exactly what's going on. And then as soon as I hit solo here, boom, it kicks me back out mix. So it's just another really easy way to work with your MIDI inside the MIDI, or inside the larger context of the edit window. Now, this is all great, but the only problem with the dock MIDI editor is there's not a whole lot of space. And I can make the dock MIDI editor bigger, but as I make the dock MIDI editor bigger, I'm making my edit window smaller. So at some point, this is going to not exactly do really what I want it to do. In my personal work, the dock MIDI editor is a great place to real quickly check one part that I'm working on, but I'm not going to look at 3 or 4 or 5 different parts at the same time. It's just not that kind of a window. So I'll just go ahead and close this out. I'm back to the normal edit window. And what I'm going to do, instead of using the docked MIDI editor, is I'm going to go up here to the window drop-down menu, and I'm going to go to the MIDI editor window. And this is full-on of the MIDI editor. It's not docked as part of the window. It's its own separate thing. So I'm going to go over here, MIDI editor, boom, and now you see it opens up the MIDI editor window, and again I can see a number of different tracks. Right now you can see I've got my tracks as notation, and that's great. It's almost like a little score, and if I know how to read a score and work within it, I'm a very happy camper. But if I want to look at piano roll, I wonder what I'm going to see. Let's go ahead and turn off notation. So this button, which is blue right now, I'm going to turn this off. And now what you're going to see are all of this data, all of the visible tracks are all mushed together. And it's a little bit of a problem. Now we've got a bit of an issue because all of the clips, if you remember before, all of the clips that you saw in the edit window were blue, except for one clip that was red. So if I take a look at this note right here, I have no real idea which track it belongs to, because in the edit window, all of those tracks have the same color clips. So there's a way that I can get around this. If you take a look up here, up in the upper left-hand corner of your keyboard area here, you're going to see two different buttons. One is kind of greenish and one's red. Let's go with the red one first because it's not one that I use that often, but let me show it. If I show red, it's going to show me all of the clips in red, but they are in different shades of red depending upon the velocity of those notes. And if I go ahead here, let's go and see here, I've got a dark red note here, and then over here I've got a lighter red note, and that's going to give me a sense of the velocity on those. That's not going to be the way that I'm going to want to work this time, so I turn that off, and now I'm back to my blue notes, which isn't really helping me out that much. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go and click this green button, and what it does is it automatically and arbitrarily assigns a unique color to each one of the tracks. Now, which color? It's Pro Tools' choice. But if I go over here, I can see that my delay piano is kind of this kind of brownish color. This greenish color over here is going to be the intro lead. And if I click on that note, you're going to see that it's going to click over there. Right next to the word intro lead, you're going to see there's a little green icon, and that's the color that was assigned to it by Pro Tools so that I can distinguish between all of the different tracks. And I can see all my tracks together so I can see how my harmonies are working in context of everything else. But I might want to see other kinds of data. So I'm going to go ahead here and I'm going to close this window out. And I'm going to open up another one of my MIDI editors. And notice, by the way, I can have multiple. Let's go to this one. See, there we go. Now, I'm showing just my delay piano. Okay, delay piano and the keys. It's really just this little kind of brown guy. Again, if I go ahead and start, I can click the solo button, and it solos in place. So when I solo here, it mutes everything else in the edit window, which is great for me to preview what I'm listening to over here. Now, I can also see for any of my tracks. So right now you can see I've got my piano roll view, which gives me a lot of control over the beginnings and the ends of the notes. But I also want to be able to see other things like velocity. And so what I can do is down at the very bottom of the track, you can see a little disclosure triangle, and I click this. And I'll give this a little bit more space here. There we go. Bring this up like this. And I can show any kind of data that I want to see. Now, very commonly, I'm going to have velocity at the top because it's a very important kind of data. And so if I wanted to change the velocity of a certain note, so you can drag that up and drag it down and get it to be exactly where I want it to be. In the next column there, I've got MIDI volume. So there's MIDI volume for all my tracks. I've got audio volume as well for all of the tracks that are being shown. So if I start to hide some other tracks, then it's going to only show the data for those selected tracks. If I start to show more tracks in my integrated environment, you can see, for example, here's the MIDI volume for all of the different tracks that are being shown, and the data here is color-coded just like data for the track. So this orange note, that is going to be the same as the orange data over here. So all the color coding that you see in the notes up there is going to be reflected in velocity and all the other continuous controls. And I can see any kind of data that I want to see. And this is going to be where I live a lot of my creative life. This is the window that I'm going to go to. Very often I'll switch over to notation view, just to see how things are looking as they are laid out on the staff. But you notice that these are half notes and whole notes, not the nuance of minute changes. If I want to do minute changes, then I'm going to go into the piano roll, and I can switch back and forth. It's not a problem. It's super, super easy to do. Now, the only problem that we have here really is, if you take a look at the way that this window goes, you can see that the notes just keep on going. There's no page breaks or anything like that. It just keeps on going forever. So if I was to print this, I would be printing out the Dead Sea Scrolls. I mean, it would be just a long piece of paper. So it's not a practical print method. So if I wanted to give this to a piano player, or if I wanted to give this to a live musician, this window, as great as it is for composition and for editing and for all the work that I want to do creatively myself, is not going to help me give something that's presentable to a musician that they can put on a music stand. In order to do that, I'm going to jump over to another window, and that is called the score editor. And the score editor, again, operates with a lot of the same logic as the MIDI editor. And you're going to see here all the different tracks that are being shown. And I'm going to go ahead and hide all my other tracks except for my delay piano. Again, this is just one for the delay piano. Now you're going to see here that the score is tremendously large. So we're going to do some changes over here. And what I can do is I can go over here, and I'll go to the score setup, and I can put a title in, and I'll put, come on. And it's not letting me type because I'm on Zoom. Fabulous. So I could, let's see here. No, I can't type it. But I could type. I could put in that if I wasn't on Zoom right now. I can put the spacing, and I could start to change the spacing between staves and start to bring it down to something that's a little bit more. There we go. That's a little bit easier. So these are the distance between the staves, the distance between the systems. Whoops. Let's bring that down. Yep. And we'll bring this up a bit. And we're just kind of jury rigging this. It doesn't have to look super, super pretty. It just has to be something that we can output to a PDF file and give to them. Now, notice here, by the way, you can see there I have a selected note, and I can select notes here. I can do my composition in here if I really want to. I tend not to do it because there's no way in the score editor window to change between a notation view and piano roll. You're always in notation view. So this is really the way that I like to think of it. This is primarily for presenting music to a live performer. This is going to be for printing, and the way you would print it is you would go to File, and you would print the score, and it would print out whatever pages that you've got over here. Think of it as a very scaled down version of a notation program like Sibelius. Now, there is one fabulous feature in here that I think doesn't get enough press. So we're going to go over here. I'm going to do a right click, and instead of going to score setup, I'm going to go to the track settings. And you can see here, these are the track settings, and I can choose whatever track I want to configure. So I'm going to go to delay piano. Now, it's a piano, so a piano generally lives on a grand staff, but if I wanted, I could put it on a bass clef. It's not going to work out really well because it's a piano, so let's change it back to a grand staff. Now, and I'm pulling on a topic that is possibly not wise for me to do so, but for people who are writing for live instruments like trumpet, clarinet, saxophone, and so on and so forth, these are instruments called transposing instruments. So, for example, a trumpet is a B-flat instrument. That means when it plays a B-flat, you don't hear a B-flat, you hear something different, right? And this is specifically for your orchestral instruments. And you can do something very cool here. You can do what's called a display transposition. So right now, this is being presented in the key of C, as a C instrument, as a non-transposing instrument. But if this was a trumpet section, what I would do is I would change this to B flat, and I would raise it up an octave. And now what's happened is I have changed the way the music looks. And I could change it to E flat for saxes. You can change it for F for French horn. You can do any of the transpositions you're going to need to do. It doesn't change the way that track sounds in Pro Tools. It is a display transposition only, which means that this track, you have not actually transposed it. It still sounds the same. If I was to solo it, that track would sound exactly the same as it did before, but it's going to look different so that a trumpet player or a clarinet player or whoever, depending upon your transposition, can play it, which is a fantastic way to work. I'm going to take you back to C, and I'm going to put it back to a 0. So this is the normal concert pitch piano part. Now, the other thing that happens is that when you play a part live, so you play chords like this, you're not playing perfect whole notes or half notes or quarter notes or eighth notes. You're playing, within up to 1/960th of a beat. That's a tick. So what we also have over here, which is fantastic, is a thing called display quantization. So display transposition moved the pitches up and down visually, but didn't change the fundamental audio, the MIDI track that it's looking at. It was a visual transposition to make it easier for a trumpet player to play. You also display quantization, and I'm going to turn the quantization relatively off, and you're going to now see that's what I actually played. And if you were to print out this music for a piano player and say, play this, their head would explode because it's just too much detail, and it's more detail than you would ever need. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make it appropriately clear what I want that piano player to do. So I'll go to something like, let's say, 16th note. And now we're looking at something pretty good. And actually, this is probably even more than I need. So I could even go to a half note. And now we're getting to the realm where this is a very readable, accessible part, and a piano player can play it. And again, this is only a display transposition. All of the nuance of the part still exists in Pro Tools. So if I go to the MIDI editor, if I go into the edit window, all of the human nuance of the original performance has not been changed. I've only simplified how it looks so that we don't give the piano player a heart attack when we put the music in front of them. And that's just a real quick look at some of the key points. And I'm going to do one other thing real quickly that I forgot to do before. I'm going to go back to, let's see here. Let's go to the MIDI editor. We'll go to this little dude over here. We'll go over here. And one of the things I want to show are some preferences. Now, you'll notice up here that your toolbar up at the top of the MIDI editor is not quite as extensive as the toolbar at the top of the edit window. And there's a lot of things we've done to save a little bit of space, and some of them can be a little bit confusing. So if I go over here, if you take a look at, I have the expanded edit tools and the expanded grid and nudge display. And I'm going to turn off expanded tools. And before we do that, if you take a look over here, you're going to see all of my edit tools. Like you can see I've got the grabber, trim, selector, the zoomer, trim, selector, grabber, scrub, and pencil tools. That is the expanded edit tools view. But if I don't want to give all that real estate to the tools, I can unclick this, and what happens is all of my edit tools turn into this one button. And what I can do, I haven't lost any of the access to tools. I just changed the way I look at them. So now I can see that the tool is the straight edge pencil tool, but if I click this button, I can go and change to the grabber tool, or I can change to the trim tool, and I can change even to the smart tool, and it gives you this little comb looking thing. And it just uses up just a little bit less real estate. But sometimes if you're new to the MIDI editor or the Dr. MIDI editor, this can be a little bit confusing. There's no right or wrong answer. It's just how you want to take a look at it. The other thing that I've got here is you can see I've got my grid setting over here, and I've got my nudge value over here. Again, that is because I have the expanded grid and nudge display. If I turn that off, then the grid display and the nudge display occupy the same space on your desktop. Right now, this is my grid, which is a quarter note. If I want to go and see what my nudge is, I click this little disclosure triangle, change it over to nudge, and there's my nudge value, which is a whole note, which is probably the least useful nudge in the world. And that is my whirlwind tour of the docked MIDI editor, the MIDI editor window and the score editor. And hopefully at this point, Dawn, we have a couple of questions.
We do have a few questions that have come in, so feel free to get those entered and we'll get those over to Andy to ask. One question was, are you able to print the music notation for each individual MIDI track once you are done editing?
Yeah, you can. So it's not quite as automated as the workflows are in Sibelius, for example. So what you do, let's go back over here to the score editor. Right now, the whole idea behind this is not to print out pieces for the orchestra. That's Sibelius's job. The whole idea behind this is I've got a bass player in the studio right now, and I need to get him a rough part right now. So any tracks that are being shown will be part of printed. So right now I've got a score of piano, delay piano, intro arp 2, intro lead, synth effect. Okay, so all of these things are in what will be printed out. But there's no automatic way to just select 5 tracks and have 5 different parts go out. If you want to have 5 individual parts go out in Pro Tools, then it's basically show one at a time and then print them out. Where's my mouse? There it goes. So what I would do if I wanted to show just this part over here, so for example, here's my synth effect, and so I'm only showing the synth effect. Let's get rid of that. Yeah. And I'll take intro arp out. So there, it's just synth effect, the only one that I'm showing. And so at that point, I would print that as an individual part, and then I would show one other individual part. So it is a little bit more manual and time intensive for this, but just remember, that's what this page is really designed for. If you want to create an orchestral score and then with one click spit out all the individual parts, that's what Sibelius is for. One other thing when it comes to printing is you can print to a PDF, which is now becoming a real popular way for especially studio cats to work. Just go ahead and save it to a PDF and then email it over, and Bob's your uncle. So we support all the same kind of printing that you might expect from any other application. Hopefully that answers your question.
It looks like it does so far. I'm not seeing anybody chime back with that one. Another question. Are you able to import the tracks in and display them in this way?
Are you able to import tracks in and display them this way? If I understand the question correct, any MIDI or instrument track in your session is viewable in this window. So whether or not I recorded it in Pro Tools or imported it from another session, once it's in my session, I can show those tracks and I can use those in the score editor window. Alternately, if you take a look at the MIDI editor window, and come on, don't freeze on me. If you take a look at the MIDI editor window, which is nice, you're going to see all of the MIDI instrument and also aux tracks. Aux tracks are also shown in the MIDI editor window because we use aux tracks a lot for virtual instruments. So it's important to be able to show those if you really need them. Whether or not you imported them or whether or not you recorded them natively in there, they will all show up. If they're in your session, then they're accessible from the MIDI editor or score editor windows.
All right, thank you. Another question's come in about the integration with Sibelius and Pro Tools. Mm-hmm. Can you speak a little bit about the integration?
You sure can. So if I go over here and let's say I'm going to select, come on, my computer's all of a sudden becoming disturbingly sluggish. So what I'm going to do over here is I'm going to go to File, Export. Let's see, I can export it to Sibelius, but I haven't done it so often that I think maybe, do you have to select the clip? And Pro Tools is really getting slow, because let's see if that's what I have to do. I have to get back to you on that. Yes. Oh, I know. I know why Sibelius isn't there, because I don't have it installed. Because I'm a big dumb animal. Yes, you can export to Sibelius, but you have to have it actually installed. If you don't have Sibelius installed, it's great, because I'm a big dumb animal. But yes, what this will do is it will take your selected MIDI tracks and it will spit it out, not just as MIDI. So you can export as MIDI too, and it's going to export it as a as a standard MIDI file. But if you export to Sibelius, then all of your track settings, so how you have your staves, all of the, any chord changes, any symbols that you have over there that you've created inside of Pro Tools, key signature changes and stuff like that, that all transfers. So it does carry a little bit more data with it than a standard MIDI file. So if you're going to start writing in Pro Tools and then continue to do serious publication, then what I would do is I would do my writing in Pro Tools, and then I would export my MIDI tracks to Sibelius, and then in Sibelius, that's where you do your fine tweaking. That's where you do your really, really refined stuff. You put your glissandos and your cymbals and the whole 9 yards, lyrics and all that stuff, all the stuff that you can't do inside of Pro Tools. And then you spit out your parts in a way that is engraver ready, which is not what this feature inside. It's really important that the score editor, MIDI editor inside of Pro Tools is designed for the creative process, not necessarily for publication.
And thank you for that. I know we're coming on the bottom of the hour. So I will note, though, we did have a few Sibelius ones that I also think touched on that integration with Pro Tools last month. So you can always go back and look those up at avid.com/online learning webinars and check out some of those Sibelius ones we posted. Andy, so let me see if any other questions come in. In the meantime, I will go ahead and share my screen over here so everyone can see our upcoming sessions. So hopefully everybody can see that. We do have sessions on Thursday next week. Right now, we do not have anything scheduled for Tuesday, but always keep looking. We may have something posted there. So keep an eye out for that. So Andy, thank you so much for the questions or for the presentations. And thank you, everyone, for joining, for the great questions. If you do have questions that we didn't get answered, feel free to drop us a line at liveonlinelearning@avid.com, and I will get those over to Andy. Also, if there are topics you want to see, you can drop us a note there as well.
Yes, we are running out of topics. So
well, we've done like 7 of these throughout the summer, so we're covering quite a bit, which is great. So we're always looking for topics, that's for sure.
Yep.
Of course, we love to have Andy's topics with us too. So, so with that, I'll let everyone get on with their day, and I'll let Andy get to bed. I know he's joining us from Japan, so it's probably like 1 a.m. over there right now. So, thank you, Andy. I appreciate it, and thank you all for attending.
Thank you, guys. All right, take her easy. Bye-bye.